This is Susan Popoola, host of the Leading the Mosaic World podcast, with a special series on being a man in today's world. As of late, I found myself increasingly conversing with men and focusing my work on boys and men. Boys and young men trying to find their place in the world, emerging leaders in the workspace, established leaders navigating increasingly complex environments, and successful men missing a sense of real fulfillment. It all points to the question of what it means to be a man in today's world. A question fundamental to men, for gender harmony, and for a mosaic world in which everyone is valued for who they are and what they have to offer to the world around them. Join me as I explore this subject with a rich diversity of men and women too. Thank you. This is a special series of the Leading the Mosaic World podcast focused on being a man in today's world. My guest today is Lawrence, popularly known as Larry DeMarco. Larry is an attorney with more than 3 decades of experience advocating for injured workers and protecting their rights. He is the founder of the Law Center, offering free and low-cost resources for self-represented litigants in child custody court. Alongside his legal career, Larry serves as executive manager of the International Council for Men and Boys, ICMB, a non-governmental organization dedicated to celebrating the positive contributions of men and boys to society and advancing gender equality by addressing disparities that disproportionately affect them. His work brings together a commitment to justice, advocacy, and constructive dialogue around the challenges and opportunities facing men and boys in today's world. Larry, thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yep. And so can I get started by asking the question, where were you born and raised?
Born technically across the bridge in Stratford, New Jersey, raised in South Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the United States.
Okay, so I know some parts of America, but I'm not fully an expert. And so I'm just wondering where you were born, where you were raised. What was it like for you growing up?
I was raised in the founding city of our country, Philadelphia, which has centennial and birth of our nation implications. I'm saying that because it's the 250th celebration of our country, and Philadelphia's having great pomp and circumstances and a lot going on this year in our city. The World Cup, we have several games, All-Star baseball game, which is big here. That's your version of cricket, and a whole bunch of other music and celebrations and things like that. Growing up in this city itself was really hard for me because Broad Street, my street, is on a highway, and we were raised inside. We had a backyard that we used to play in that was completely concrete and was 3 yards wide. Oh, it was terrible. But it was not a safe neighborhood back then. So we didn't have grass. We wouldn't walk to neighbors. We had to be escorted and driven everywhere. So Philadelphia was hard as a child and much more positive when I came back from college, law school, and then living in a single man in the city was easier than being raised.
Okay. And so I'm just thinking about that and specifically thinking of you as, should I say, a boy growing up there and a young man. There's the bit that you mentioned where you mentioned the fact that you were indoors a lot of the time and where you had to go, you were driven to. But then I'm just thinking of, as a boy, outside of that, what was life like for a boy? Because I'm thinking of boys now and boys then.
I had two brothers, have two brothers. We were each other's best friends, competitors, rivals. So we were close because we always played together in the house, unless my mother drove us somewhere and we would visit family friends or school friends. But that had to be planned. We couldn't come home from school and run outside and play. So that was a negative effect. But my father was a center city attorney and active in politics. So it was important to him to live near his voting base. He was a committeeman, which is an elected official of a political party. And he took that very seriously and he got business from that. So that's why we did that. And there was some tension between my mother and father because she hated living there and wanted to be with her friends in suburbia where we can go out and play and run in parks and things like that. So it was challenging and not optimal, but better later, as I mentioned.
So how did it change later?
We, first of all, there was a positive part. Our summers, we went down to Jersey Shore, as people in Philadelphia call it, the beach. So we had a summer beach home that was kind of like 3 months of paradise every summer. So we did have that. I don't mean to say it was all just challenging. It was also very, very nice. I went away to college and I went away to law school, which was kind of like being free as a bird from. And once you get a car, things were easier because you could drive, and then the city was then more of a positive thing. Leave it at that.
Yeah. So I guess the difference was that you could drive wherever you wanted to go. You had more flexibility and freedom.
Sure. Then college and law school was great because I went and lived on campus at the school, and then we were around young people. And then even when we got home and I had the car, we're not driving far because everything was within a mile or 2 miles or 3 miles, and you had this freedom. We could take cabs. So as bad as it was earlier, it then became the positive later. And I lived at home and saved a lot of money because I was given my freedom and privacy. I almost had an apartment at the top of my parents' house, a bachelor pad, if you will. So then that was really exciting and the place to be during my early adulthood, my 20s.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking, you mentioned a challenging area, but you've also mentioned things that people would describe as privileges in terms of the environment that you personally lived in. And and we often talk, and I'm linking that to the fact that we often talk about men, and we often talk about men as being privileged. And I'm sort of jumping here because with your work, you talk about the challenges that boys and men are faced with. And I'm just curious as to what you see as challenges that men and boys face.
Male privilege, I would push back on now, maybe not historically. If you go back 100 years, if you're going back that far, I certainly see what you mean by that. I would say in around, it's hard to say when because it was a continuum, but there was a overcorrection in trying to change that imbalance or whatever privilege that men had in an industrial or a new society. So I do recognize my privilege. My dad was a professional and my mom didn't have to work, and we did have a vacation home. So please let me acknowledge that I was blessed. And as the leader of the international executive manager of the International Council for Men and Boys, I can state from firsthand my own experience that part of male disadvantage comes not from children who are born in up middle class or upper middle class and privilege. It is more broken homes where parents aren't together and boys face father absence is where the struggles really are created. And no child is benefiting from a broken home, but boys take that a little harder statistically. So that's really where I see my work and our messaging is really helping disadvantaged that are children from broken homes that are father absent that really struggle. Not so much a child born to two loving parents who provide every advantage that I had.
Okay. And thank you for clarifying. I'd love to understand the differences between the two and the impact that a broken home has on a child, most specifically a boy.
I can, answer that in a short phrase, father absence. And what brought me into this movement was my own troubled relationship with my older son's mom. We went through the court system and I had to fight for the right to see my son on weekends because of a high conflict situation. Children without fathers statistically face multiple times of a disadvantage that than children with fathers in the home. That ranges into like incidents of crime, addiction, truancy, being single parents, educational, employment, all the statistics that are based on given negative scores, you become double, triple, or quadruple a risk for bad outcomes without a father's influence.
And it might seem obvious, but I'm going to ask why? I mean, why does not having a father in a household have that impact?
Children
Because you can
need
very easily say, well, you've got a mother, you you might have other, I mean, you have a mother, you might have other relatives or a network around, but even if you don't, you have a mother who is around, who's loving and caring, possibly exerts discipline in her own way. So why is it so important to have a father present?
children take their identity from the same sex parent. They're the role model. And in a society where 80% of grade school teachers are women and society doesn't think highly of men who are in preschool or early education, which leads to that statistic, a child, a boy without a male role model doesn't have anything to model his own behavior, so he looks at the nearest influence. Now, you could have an uncle, you can have a grandfather, and often you, as long as you have that strong, loving, positive male role model, the numbers are better, the results and outcomes are better. But a child without a strong male influence or is led to human nature and the negative human behavior that people naturally gravitate to. And that's what we as parents do for our children. We give them culture, we teach them right for wrong. Because if you don't have a loving parent teaching you that, or a same sex role model modeling that positive behavior, your natural reaction is to adopt the most negative habits of human behavior.
And I have to ask, why is that? I mean, I don't understand. A child would naturally lean towards the negative, and this isn't me challenge it, it's me trying to understand why a child would lean towards the negative.
Well, I think it's human behavior. It's not a child, or it's just, look at what society is without manners, without a thank you, without service. If everyone is just out for themselves, and that's what survival of the fittest is. You don't see your fellow man as a support system or benefit. They're competitors. It's a dog eat dog world. It's survival of the fittest. So with society and parenting and culturing and manners, we learn to cooperate, support each other, and function as a partnership and in a large co-op. So a child without that lesson, without that teaching, without faith, without common courtesy, without being forced to eat right for your health, to study and do your homework rather than watch TV, go outside and to get into trouble, you have those lower outcomes and a more chaotic society rather than the cultured manners and highly functional cooperative that is a highly functional society.
Thank you. So I'm just curious as to what the International Council for Men and Boys is doing to help change things.
We have research and have recorded the data of 12 areas of male disadvantage, and they're
Okay.
listed on our website, menandboys.net. With all the data and statistics that we've compiled, not only do we raise awareness of the problem, but we also propose solutions. There is a common, and this is part of I think you acknowledge this in the theme of your podcast, that men can be seen as a problem to control. The negative parts of men have been, in our opinion, over publicized to the point where that there's a common viewpoint that women are positive and valuable and men are negative and disposable. So we are trying to change that modern not narrative that men are bad, and instead we promote that they're good or as good as women. We're actually an equality movement for men. Gender equality for men is our hashtag, and that is what we are trying to have people start thinking again.
And in many ways, that links to when I talk about gender harmony and creating a harmony between men and women. But when you talk about the focus on the negative and the talk about boys and men almost as problems without acknowledging the positive things about them, I just wonder from your experience as a man and those that you talk to, how does that make you feel? And how does that impact you?
I became aware of it. I wasn't even aware of it until I met the International Council for Men and Boys. Before that, I read Warren Farrell's The Boy Crisis, which showed me the data and the statistics, and I felt blessed that I was not one of those statistics because, Susan, like you started this podcast, I do feel that I have enjoyed the privilege that you recognized and you discussed. So I do want to acknowledge that there's privilege for both genders, and men had enjoyed primary privilege in the early parts of society. And now really we're at a temporary moment of a huge overcorrection because women have fought to raise awareness about abuse, that people aren't nice to each other and they can really exploit their partner and loved ones to their own selfish benefit at the detriment of the weak. So we are grateful and we are respectful and acknowledge the gains that women fought with blood, sweat, and tears for the right to vote, the right for dignity in a marriage and in a relationship. So when you talk about harmony, I love that theme of this podcast. We're present to that. In 2026, we have a campaign called Restoring Trust between Men and Women, which to me centers around good communication, but we can get into that as you wish.
I just wonder if I was a man, how I would feel if I'm spoken of as a problem and how that actually feels for boys and men.
It's a source of great depression with the women empowering movement and a blending of roles, that there has been a purpose void for men and boys, which leads to the statistics of depression and suicide. Well, not depression, suicide. The statistics for suicide are triple for young boys than for young girls. Ironically, just for depression, I think it's higher for girls. So boys are very lethal in how they adjust to the depression that maybe both sides feel. So, and part of that deep despair that men and boys have is that you have a lot of, the loss of jobs, unemployment hits a man right to his identity because men are often measured by their ability to support their families, their wives and children. So when a man struggles financially, it hits him twice as hard. When a boy doesn't excel in school, when he is not in tune with his emotions and is penalized for being active and just being a boy because the female qualities are somewhat celebrated by majority female teachers and a new educational system that now is centered toward women. And again, I want to acknowledge that women had to struggle to get an education. So there's a lot of complexities here in the societal dynamics. So I am talking about a moment in time that I want to recognize without ignoring. I'm hearing our female listeners and our sisters who are gauging in judgment a movement like this. So it's backbreaking and it's crushing for young men who are considered less than their feminine classmates.
Yeah. And I just wonder about the expectations. Who is creating the expectations of men to, should I say, be providers, to be people that never fail? Where do those expectations come from? And are they still valid in today's world?
So we're talking about expectations for men, and there's
Yes,
also very, just talking to my wife about this, the enormous expectations on women. We're not going to get into that, but I want to recognize that there's expectations on
yes.
both. And it comes from traditional society and, old fashioned traditional notions of gender roles. And so, yes, we can recognize that there's somewhat a change, but just because there isn't a change doesn't mean that that's not where these expectations came from. To your question, they come from society. No one person, there's not a group of people that said these are the expectations. It is expectations that have developed over the course of time and still exist now.
Should we be changing those expectations though?
Some of them come up naturally based upon the differences of the sexes, which come from scientific basis. I think what we should change is unreasonable expectations or over generalities, because that's where the trouble comes from. But some of nature and some of attitudes and opinion just come from the natural science of where nature placed us. So we do change them. And I do think that we try to be reasonable, understanding, and compassionate to the best of our abilities. But there's some parts of expectations that we can't change and are based upon our natural roles.
Can you give an example of the type of thing that we can't change or shouldn't change?
That men are more rational, women are more stronger emotional. There's masculine traits that, as much as we wish or want to say that we're the same, men are more cooperative, teammates, protectors. Statistically, if you ask men and women, would you die for your partner? Men have much higher rates of things that they would, they would cut off body parts. They would lay their life down for their spouse, and where the spouse is like, no, because women are taught to stay alive for the children. They're nurturers, and that's something from childhood. Women are always going to bond with an infant that they just carried for 9 months early faster than a man will, even though that they both can have a nurturing part of them. So you have women that have a natural inherent connection to an infant child, and you have a man who naturally sees himself as disposable for the benefit of the human race so that woman could take care of that child.
And I pause and I reflect on that, and I'm not going to say I agree or disagree because it's not so much about what I think, it's understanding your perspective and what you believe for people to learn. People, we don't always have to agree, but I always believe in the conversation to understand different people, and that almost links back to restoring trust through communication, as you mentioned earlier. And with that, I would like to go to the 12 areas that you mentioned that you're focused on. Don't need to talk about all of them, but are there like three of those key areas that you're able to highlight?
Sure. Let's see. I think a big one with us, with our colleagues and our partners, are partner abuse. And another one is false allegations. And another, I'll say parenting for the benefit of our discussion. So I think that there is the thing that hurts men now and really devastating to a father is that there's a attitude that men can't be abused in a relationship because they're mostly physically stronger. But with the understanding and the rightful gains that women have publicized that there is abuse in relationships, women can manipulate their advantages of laws, and they can weaponize false allegations that playing field is leveled, whereas perhaps there was an unfair, but before women in the movement exposed the horrors of physical domestic abuse, there is now an understanding that that exists, but people are not aware of the epidemic of false allegations and men as victims of abuse, which can be manipulated in court and causes many men to lose contact with their child when that can be used to advantage in a custody situation or divorce.
When you say that, I mean, in recent times, I've got a greater awareness in relation to domestic abuse. But most people would say or understand domestic abuse to be something suffered by women, not by men.
That's right. Most people would, and statistically, the statistics are equal that the reporting, that the reliable studies across the globe are that there's equal incidence of domestic violence committed by women and men equally. And there are even worse and higher incidences of abuse in lesbian relationships, which demonstrates that to be abusive is not a male trait. You can say it's more female, but the point is that's not the point I'm making. The point is that it's a two directional, both sexes are equally capable of taking advantage of a weak partner and abusing or manipulating to their own benefit.
I would then ask, what are we defining as domestic abuse? Because it's easy to think of that in terms of physical violence. But is that what we're talking about, or are we also talking about other things, cohesive control, alienation, or what else? Or what do we mean?
You and I can adapt our own definitions for the purpose of this discussion, and each study, I believe, is limited to its own definitions. But overall, that I believe that there's actually a close correlation to physical violence. I mean, they're really close. Now, let's not get this wrong. Men who are strong have a better ability to hospitalize, to break bones, to create swollen facial features and whatnot, whereas a woman is more likely to slap, humiliate, maybe scratch, and not nearly the damage that a bodybuilder or a physical football player or a man can cause. But the studies show that most abuse, the vast majority of abuse, is mutual. So you have a woman who is using all her strength to try and hurt, and a man who's probably trying to pull some punches. But the whole point is not to measure. The point is that both sides are abusive physically to each other, and things escalate from there.
I'm going to, because people would be probably thinking, is that possibly women fighting back, trying to defend themselves?
Well, there's studies on aggression, and the studies don't bear that out. That no, it's actually women who, again, I don't want to say more. I just want to say that I'm confident in saying, oh, look, that happens. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but statistically, that men are not considered aggressors. It pretty much goes either women are slightly more aggressive or really right down the middle. Uh, I'm not trying to say, I'm not trying to compare
You're
and
not trying to
contrast
say
here.
one is
I'm not trying to say, listen, I would hate for me to quote one study where women are, and people are saying, oh, he's saying women are worse than men. So I'm really staying far apart that. That having been said, I've already acknowledged that men could be more physically damaging, but also women are better at false allegations and what you just mentioned, things like parental alienation, because whatever words you use, contact refusal or a psychological abuse or violence by proxy, by poisoning a child against another parent, that's usually done by the primary custodian. The primary custodian has more opportunity to use that effectively, which statistically is female. Personally, I think if you had a society where women worked, that I think men would be doing more parental alienation. So again, I think others may argue that women are more apt to do it. If you talk to Amy Baker, and Amy Baker says, and she's one of the leading experts, that the prevalence is for the parent who has greater access
yeah,
to that.
and there's almost a logic to that. And I just think, what do we do about it? What does ICMB, yourself and ICMB, what are you doing to, should I say, prevent, minimize this? And what can the rest of us do?
So there's 12 areas of male disadvantage. The easiest way to answer such a broad question is we're trying to raise awareness of where society gets it wrong, of where all the laws, all the attitudes, all the entertainment, all the media shows, the commercials, where everyone believes something, laws follow. So if everyone is demonizing and vilifying men, you have an imbalance of laws that create unfairness in things like the law and custody situations. So when you say what we can do about it, what we see our role is to change the narrative and the way people think. So we're not the strongest on programming. We don't run any programs. We issue several press releases a year. So it's one a week, but we also have companion organizations that we support each other. And we also issue maybe 3 total on companion organizations. And we have created Men's Equality Month in November, which corresponds to International Men's Day on November 19th. And that's really parallel to Women's History Month in March. So just like there was a Mother's Day first, then came Father's Day, there's a Women's History Month, and we're trying to raise awareness on Men's Equality Month to show that both genders struggle and both genders deserve acknowledgement.
It's an interesting title, though, because when you say men's equality, there is a risk of people immediately thinking, what do you mean equality for men? Because men are seen as advantaged. So I'm wondering why, I mean, I don't even know whether I've got a specific question, but
No, I can understand your question. I understand where your thoughts are going, and I'll give you that example that you're requesting. So women are now 6 out of 10 college students. Men are vastly more likely to drop out of school, to not go to college and not become professional. But there are scholarships only for women, none for men. That's inequality. That is a correction, an overcorrection that is being double redundant. So a man has no chance of getting a sex specific scholarship, even though 2/3 of women are getting graduate degrees. There's an example.
And when you say that, I think this is when intersectionality might come to play, because it's just like earlier when we were talking about men, and we mentioned your background. You fortunately have a degree of privilege. Not to say you don't have challenges, because everyone does, no matter how privileged they are, but you have a degree of privilege. And then you mentioned your focus is on boys and men who face disadvantage. And so when we talk about those numbers, so there is that whole thing about intersectionality, whereby we often say men, women, and they're blanket statements. And so, as we said earlier, you had certain degrees of privilege. There's nothing wrong with that. But then you mentioned that the focus is on boys and men who are faced with disadvantage. So when we're talking about men and women here, I'm also finding myself thinking about that degree of advantage and disadvantage. So is it blanket? So when we say men don't receive, does that include men from minority backgrounds who aren't receiving that support? Does that include men from socially economically deprived backgrounds? Because it's another one of those things whereby is it all or segments?
The best way I can address what I understand you to be asking is that as an advocate for men, or any advocate is there, we make generalities. Oh, I'm protecting men, or I'm helping men, or a women's organization. The point of our, I don't want to say movement, but the point of our organization is that both genders struggle. And when you have 99% of resources for one gender and 1% of the resources for the other, it creates a justification to have an expression called gender equality for men, which is deliberately chosen to raise a question and to start a conversation that we recognize, and we're not trying to take from women. We don't want to take resources from women, but we want to recognize that advocacy is about not helping men of privilege become more privileged. They're not the ones that need the help. It's the weak, it's the minorities, it's the underprivileged, it's the uneducated, it's the children who are orphans. It's the wrongfully incarcerated. It's for the falsely accused. It's for the disabled who are injured during work. It's for our veterans who fought for us and protected our country. It's for people in the media who have suffered from character assassination because of false accusations. So that's what advocacy is about. We still need women abuse shelters because there's bad men who beat their wives. But we also need judges to understand the power of a false allegation against a reputation, against an athlete who can get canceled just because someone wants to be vindictive, not because they were harmed.
I've seen the cases whereby there's been a man that has been falsely accused. Some might say that they're just a minor number of cases, but the key is it happens, and you can think of how it can destroy a whole person's life. And so, also, when we go back to men's equality, I think we're in many ways talking along the same line, because I'm someone that believes very much it's not or, it's and. And so, if I understand correctly, we need to continue the support with the support that we provide for women. But when we think of men and we think of the fact that, yes, as we said earlier, there has been, should I say, the privilege or advantage that a number of men have had historically, there are also those men that always have and now are disadvantaged in their own right, such as you mentioned, the orphan, the person from the disadvantaged background, or what have you, that need support just as much as women. Would that be fair?
Yes. Yes, it's hard to add to that. That was perfectly eloquent. You're speaking what I'm trying to explain myself. Thank you for saying that.
That's a pleasure. But I think that's the importance of having conversations, so that there's, should I say, a joint understanding between different people, and people understand that this is what we're talking about. As you said earlier, we're not talking about increasing the advantage of people that already have advantage. It's about the nuance and supporting those that don't.
So, and to your point, I just want to explain that that's why I start by saying if I talk about education and men dropping out of school and not going to college, for me to say gender equality for men, it's important for me to what I'm always reminded by my wife. It's important for me to recognize that it used to be only men in schools and there was no women getting education. So I have to start there. And I have to say, this is not about blame. I'm not trying to cast blame. I often see on social media question from a woman friend. So this is all women's fault? No.
No,
It's why I really want to lead with that. So with education and parenting or father absence, rather than just going through other places that, well, for men being victims of abuse, women had to raise awareness that abuse happens for me to start bringing, commenting, yeah, but now women, because laws are there to protect them, can manipulate those laws. How can I talk about men being victims if I don't recognize women were victims first? So
yeah.
I always try, if I'm going to have a discussion like this, to bring out that this is an overcorrection, but we have to start with the history of what came first.
And that is fair enough. And I'm just thinking, as you said, there's so much that we say about men, and often it's about the challenges. What would you like people to know about men? And I guess that's specifically women. What would you like us to know about men that we don't really talk about?
To answer that in the way that it was asked, which is general, so I'll try and give specific examples of specifically what. That your stoic, rough man feels that they have to turn off. They still feel. The stoic, expressionless, non-intimate man in both his physical relationship with his woman and with his relationships with his or non-physical, just emotional relationships where he seems withdrawn. He has feelings that men feel a pressure, or the men who really suppress their emotions and feelings are hiding emotion, frailty, vulnerability, and weakness, but they have feelings just like everybody else, which
So,
isn't me. I'm a crier. I'm an emotional person, but I'm speaking for my brethren. And when you ask me what I want you to know about men, that an angry, stoic, emotionless, hard man has feelings.
and that leads me thinking, the person that has all those emotions, the feelings, and like everything else that you mentioned, is potentially suppressing those things. And there are two questions that come to mind. The first is how that impacts him.
We have to, if that's the first one, I will say that if a man feels like he can't show it through expression, through positive behavior, through tears, gentle, passionate kissing, through tenderness, if he can't share it, he has frustration and he is a boiling kettle pot with a lid ready to explode. It's got to come out. And that's why sometimes that stoic man can be a monster on a football field, because it's an outlet for that pent-up emotion, whether it's rage, whether it's love and hugging your teammate after a touchdown. It's got to come out. So how it affects him is that he can't show it when he feels it. He can't show it in the morning, goodbye, honey, I love you, or doesn't express love to his children, his daughters, his sons, or whatever, but it's going to come out somewhere. And, when you hear of road rage, when you see someone who absolutely flies off the handle, that's somebody who is not managing their emotions properly. So it can lead to very potentially negative consequences for someone who doesn't have an outlet in a positive way, like an athletic field or otherwise.
So the second question then is, what can we all do, individually or jointly, to enable men to be should I say, their full selves?
To be empathetic, to encourage your husband, your brother, your children, your sons, cousins, friends, colleagues, to express themselves, that you care, that you'll listen, that you want to know them, that you can create a safe place by having a empathy, understanding, lack of judgment, and just creating a safe place for men to be themselves.
Possibly, finally, what message would you have for the young man, boy or young man, trying to navigate the world that we're in?
Just to stay on point, that not to be ashamed of your feelings or your emotions. There's celebrities who cry at the microphone in public. That emotion is a sign of strength, not weakness. That there is enormous satisfaction in being yourself, in being your own person, owning your feelings, both positive and negative, to admit fault and to face sometimes teasing, which comes from others' own insecurities and own weakness. So if you can realize, hey, we're all in this together, everyone has vulnerability, but own your own emotions, weakness, and vulnerability. In doing that, there is great strength. You become stronger when you realize that you shared, and maybe someone teased you and you didn't break, and that you will be respected by those people for being your own person. And to show that weakness actually is empowering and leadership to others.
Thank you. And just concluding with that, I mean, I think that's a great message. And I think the more you become yourself, the more you are able to positively respond to others. And the flip side of it is to also create that space that you mentioned for others too. Yes. So, Larry, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed speaking to you.
Susan, thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share. It's been great to have this conversation today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining me for today's conversation. I hope you found it insightful. Get in touch and let me know what you think, or if I or any of my guests can be of support to you. Until next time, this is Susan Popoola, working towards the creation of a Mosaic World. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Leading in the Mosaic World podcast. Do visit our website at www.mosaicworld.live to find out more about what we do and how we can be of support to you. Alternatively, connect with me, Susan Popoola, spelt Popoola, on LinkedIn, and let me know what you think of the podcast. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, give it a first-class rating, and tell everyone you know all about it. Thank you.